Hey everybody, Qroo here. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about that thing that every serious Spanish learner hits, sometimes multiple times on your journey to learn a language. I know I have. It is that dreaded plateau. No matter what you seem to do, it's just kind of stuck. Your verbal comprehension's not getting better, your ability to speak the language is not getting better, and naturally, you're getting very frustrated. As I said, I know about the plateaus very well. I've encountered several on my journey to learn Spanish, and I'm going to share some tips with you today on how I punched through those, how I pushed my Spanish to the next level and started seeing those gains again. Number one on this list is to start narrating your day to yourself, all right? People always complain, well, I don't have anybody to practice with, Paul. You're there all the time. You always have yourself. So start to kind of narrate your day. And this will depend, what your level is. Maybe you're only really good at the present tense. So you're like, okay, I'm getting up out of bed. And you're thinking, well, I don't know how to say to get up. So you go look it up. Levantarse. So you're like, okay, me levanto. Or you're doing the past tense. Me levanté. All right, what am I doing now? Voy a la cocina. And all through your morning and your day, you start to narrate what you're doing. This is like an artificial way to start thinking in Spanish. You're narrating to yourself. And when you hit those gaps in your Spanish, it's going to be pretty obvious. Luckily nowadays, we have access to so many resources to look things up. You have some great apps you can use. One of the ones I really like is DeepL. And a lot of times with DeepL, you can see alternative translations because there's not just one way to say something, all right? Second one on my list is one that really helped me, and I've used it to help students, that I've tutored over the years, and it is the rewind drill. I call it the rewind drill because, you're just going through your day and you're speaking English to someone or possibly having some internal narrative, and you stop and you go, rewind. If I had to say that in Spanish, how would I say it? Could I say it? Let me work through it. I'll show you how this works and really how effective it is. Let's say I just had a conversation with my friend and I was just telling him, hey, you know what? We ran out of coffee, so I ran to the store to buy more. And then we spoke, and the conversation ended. And right afterwards, I'm like, rewind drill. How would I say we ran out of coffee, so I ran to the store to buy more? That looks really simple, right? But it causes your brain to start breaking this down because that's the key to learning Spanish, is these sentences are really coming in fragments, right? And we're popping them all together. So our first segment in that sentence is, we ran out of coffee. So you're thinking, wow, how do I say that? Well, there's a couple ways. Since we're here, we might as well talk about them. You could use quedarse sin, nos quedamos sin café, right? Another popular way that I actually prefer is with acabarse, se nos acabó el café. We ran out of coffee. But right there, I'm already like, thinking about these things. And if I look them up, I might have seen both of those possible answers, right? With acabarse and quedarse. So I'm like, wow, already learning more about the language. Next thing we come to is that so. Such a simple thing, right? Just one word. What are we going to pop in there? I like así que. But you might have used por eso, therefore. We ran out of coffee, therefore I ran to the store to buy more. So you already see how much we're working on our Spanish and building on our Spanish, and we're still not done with the sentence. So let's go to our next segment, all right? I ran to the store. Do you think I literally ran to the store? I mean, maybe, if I'm feeling particularly athletic that day, I want to get my workout in. But most of the time when we say that in English, we mean we probably got there some other way, drove there, bicycle, whatever. So we definitely don't want to use the word-for-word translation. I ran to the store would just be, I went to the store. Pretty easy, right? Fui a la tienda. Fui a la tienda. To buy more. Pretty easy, right? Let me stop you for a second. Are you thinking para comprar más? I know that some of you are, because we use para to mean in order to all through the language, right? Estoy aquí para hablar con mi jefe. I'm here in order to speak to my boss. But, and here's an interesting thing, when we're talking about verbs of motion, right? Here, I went to the store to do something. It's more common to use a, not para. So this would be more natural sounding if I said, fui a la tienda a comprar más. So do you see how many things we covered and touched on with that simple rewind drill? Now, when you come up with your own translations, it's a good idea to pop things into DeepL or some other translator program just to see if you're on the right track. And if you're seeing that a comprar más, and you're like, why isn't it para comprar más? Why did they use a? Then, you can go down the rabbit hole a little further and research these things. Think if you were doing that periodically during the day. That is definitely going to push you to that next level. It pushed me to that next level. But we're not done. We're going to move on to number 3. Read a book in Spanish. And I know that sounds like, oh, Paul, I read everything in Spanish, and I try to go to the little sites and I read articles and stuff. And that's great. But read a real book, because it's going to push you. And the reason it does is because you start to get into the story, right? And you're reading through, and you're going to notice constructions, and you're going to be like, I like the way that that's phrased. And maybe that particular construction or that little phrase makes your word list. What's really important here is that you're really into the story. That's going to encourage you to keep reading it. And it doesn't have to be written by a Spanish-speaking author. It can be a translation of a book you've already read or that you like. Like, let's say you love Stephen King or Dean Koontz or anything like that. Their books come in Spanish too. I like to read books in Spanish, even if they're a translation from the English, because I feel like I'm getting 2 things done, right? I'm getting this great story and I'm improving my Spanish, or at least, reminding myself of words I may have forgotten. So I love this. Well, I'll tell you that the absolute best book that I recently read like this, that was a translation, El Psicoanalista. And it is fantastic. I highly recommend it. I'm going to stick a link to it in the description section of the video for anybody that's interested. And the last thing on my list today is to immerse yourself as much as possible in the spoken language. Now, I get people that are like, Paul, I live in an area where I don't have Spanish speakers to talk to, so I'm not, surrounded by the language. I mean, that was an excuse 10, 15 years ago, but not anymore. We have access to the internet, and you can listen to Spanish all day long. You don't even have to spend any money to do it. You can just do it through YouTube, right? Now, one of the things I recommend is the news from your target country. And when I say your target country, that's the country that you're most focused on their Spanish, right? You're trying to learn Mexican Spanish, Chilean, Spanish from Spain. What are you focused on? If you're going to look at the news, find a news channel from that particular country, okay? It's going to help you develop your ear for that particular accent. You're going to hear their word choice, colloquialisms, things like that. One thing I hear a lot from people is that they'll watch the telenovelas, which I can't stand. So actually what I prefer to do is I'll go into YouTube and I'll watch movies that are dubbed into Spanish. When you're looking at Spanish language movies, especially those that are dubbed, there are 2 different types of dubbing. You have your Peninsular Spanish or European Spanish dubbing and your Latin American Spanish. A lot of times in the title, it's going to tell you which one it is. It'll have a movie and it will say Español Latino, and you'll know that's your Latin American Spanish. There are some pretty significant differences between them, so I would suggest you stick to the type of dubbing to match the type of Spanish you're focused on. Well, that's it for the video. I hope you picked up something to help you punch through that plateau and reach that next level of Spanish you're hoping to obtain. The key here is to push yourself, right? Oh, and if you liked the video, don't forget that thumbs up. Really appreciate it. Until next time, hasta luego.